Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Detroit Nerdfighters podcast. This is, of course, the first take of this. My name is Ian the Well-Informed. I'm here with Beau and Lisa, our special guest for this episode. A little bit of a backstory. These two people were presenters at PenguinCon, so it's a pleasure to have you on this show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Our first topic is, it's June weather, correct? It's not May weather. And I bring that up because there is a boxer named Floyd Mayweather. You've heard of him, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. If you don't know, now you know. All right. But hey, do you know another person named Logan Paul?
Unfortunately,
I feel bad for me. I feel bad for you.
tragically, I think a lot of us internet people are familiar with Logan Paul. And while I always hope for people to change and grow to be better, I can't honestly say I'm excited to see him fighting Mayweather right now.
I often say that you can't trust people who have two first names. And you can't I would say that don't trust a person who's named who's not 11 months out of the year if their name is the name of a month. But then again, I do have a friend named August, which I trust all year. So shout out to him. But that's my little what's it called? My matter of fact, my matter of fact joke right there. But no, in terms of do I care about that match? I care about that match enough to talk about it for 2 minutes. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of it is if you have to leave something like YouTube because of a controversy and you still end up getting in a fight, I think that maybe you're not choosing the best things for your career.
I mean, I get it. These two fighters are manipulating the system, one much more than the other, but
yeah.
But in the end, I'm not going to watch them because I don't like them. I'm the type of person who wants to see a good fight, and between say just two people who share a lot of heart. Those are the best matches, or a match where it's like, back in the day, I watched college basketball, and my my favorite team that I absolutely love was George Mason University back when they were ranked 13 or 14 in their division, only to get to the Final Four and lose to Florida. And they took down the number one team in their division. And
awesome.
I love seeing an underdog just do something like that, and that was nothing short of amazing from what I watched. I think it was Carolina University, if I'm getting that name correctly. it starts with a C. Um, um, let's see. Um, Speaking about games and people doing their best, there was this story that came out maybe like 4 months ago that this one guy was possibly cheating when he was speed running the game Minecraft. And when you look at a game like Minecraft, you think to yourself, how is that a game that can be speed run? And there's when I first heard the news about this, I was like, I asked the same question, but then I saw a video by Game Theory. I think it's Game Theory. Um, I know it was done by Matt Pat. If you're familiar with him, that said this person may or may not have been cheating. He doesn't. There's not enough. There isn't enough evidence to support that he is or isn't, because there are other people who have higher scores, a higher time in beating Minecraft. But in a statement that he from that person, he said that he had been manipulating the RNG in the game. For people who don't know what RNG is, it stands for random number generator. Makes things within the game completely random. So, hey, that's unfortunate from that end, because I mean, we gamers or even people in general don't like when people cheat and steal, and it's generally unwelcome.
Yeah. What I had read about what happened was that I think I was reading it on like GameSpot or something. Was they were talking about how it was manipulating the rapid, like how many items were dropped with the changing the random number generator thing and everything, and that they had it on for a previous thing and forgot to took it off. So they're saying they accidentally did it, but it's still just as a reminder that like if you're going to do competitive things, that you should check your settings and everything you have modded and everything to make sure that you're not inadvertently doing something that could impact the integrity of your score, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate on the YouTuber's account, and to the I would say it doesn't hurt the reputation of the mods at Minecraft, because I mean, you can only or the mods or the developers at Minecraft for Moshe, because you take it one case at a time. There are always it's human error. You can expect people will make a mistake.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about making a mistake, and one that's not on this list that I remembered now, there was this article that came out that a site that posts emulators was sued like 4 years ago, and verdict came out that that company now owes Nintendo over $2 million for posting emulators on their site.
Wow.
And I'm like, there's, and what those are, I won't go too much into detail, but I will, but I'll make it so everyone here understands. What an emulator is basically a file of the game, basically. So you could go to the site and basically say download Super Mario World or Pac-Man or Pong. Uh, and there's a lot of gray area to posting those because I mean, the main reason why these sites post these games are that companies like Nintendo or PlayStation or things like that, companies like that, won't post every single game within their library. Like, say, for instance, Nintendo won't put out Clay Fighter or Clay Fighter 63 and a third. You'll never see those on there. And so people want to go back and play those games. And so this case sets a precedent that if there's a game that's not out there, that it's potentially doing harm to Nintendo, when in fact it really isn't. Nintendo isn't making any money off of these games.
Yeah, emulators are really interesting because, especially in the reality that a lot of consoles are discontinued over time, and therefore the games for them are discontinued and not renewed into other systems. We want to sometimes use emulators to play those games, but also in instances like where PlayStation or whoever just recently deleted a whole chunk of their digital library. Those are like modern games that people no longer have access to and can't play on their consoles, but with an emulator could potentially play it on their PC or on a different type of console that's made to emulate different games. But if companies are coming after the people making emulators and saying you can't do this, that raises a whole bunch of complications, not only in regards to like playing the games and accessing them, but about video game history and how we record and like have our legacy and archival of these games that are being deleted and lost wholesale. So it frustrates me personally to see suits like that where like people making emulators to make games accessible that are being just lost to time. Is like seeing them punished is somewhat frustrating to me, as much as I understand the desire to maintain IP.
Yeah, and what it takes away from, like, one bigger issue, like, say for instance Twitch, there's a lot of people within the Twitch community that, and I won't say, I don't play emulators. I'll say that on record, I don't. But there are people who make completely separate games based off the assets of these other games, like Super Mario World, for instance. There's this one YouTuber named Grand Pooh Bear who's had 2 games named after him. Grand Pooh World 1 and Grand Pooh World 2, and he's going to have a third soon. And it's basically off the assets of Super Mario World.
Yeah.
Does that fall under, oh, this is Nintendo's assets now? Or does it fall under, this is its own creative work and it does fall under fair use?
Yeah. It's really, it can be a very complex issue. And I think that like for me, a large part of it is if companies are going to say that like you can't use these things in certain ways, we need clear like guidelines on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And I also would say that if you're going to just delete games off your server or not make them anymore, there's a certain point at which you're saying, I'm not worried about making money off of this anymore. So other people should be able to remix it or use it in different ways. So it's a difficult issue, and especially with like this modern video game media and like ephemeral media is what people think of it as, this like stuff that's not going to be here forever. I think that we really need to reevaluate what like copyright laws and licensing, what they mean for the modern era, because it's different. It just doesn't work the same as it used
to. Not to get too much, not to go too much into left field, but this isn't a confession to the people of my podcast. It's more of a confession to you. I've had more than 10 years experience in database management. And I find it that the two things in gaming that are lacking are, one, having a time clock somewhere anywhere within the game, so that when a person sees, oh, I've been spending 3 to 4 hours on this game, I should stop because I see the time. And two, being able to disclose the information about their game, how many people bought it, how much people have been spending on the game, things of that nature, because we're getting into, it's not getting into, we've been in a gaming society that has microtransactions and loot boxes and things that are considered either gambling or far worse than gambling.
Yeah.
In our games that aren't being enforced. So there needs to be a standard behind games that should actually be more in tune with like things like HIPAA.
Yeah.
And that's saying a lot, given how much HIPAA needs to change.
Yeah.
Given the last 2 years.
It's funny that you mentioned HIPAA, because as you were talking about this, I was just thinking how common this kind of thing is in so many industries today. And I was thinking of the medical industry, where so many times they will suppress a new drug, or they will suppress this or suppress that because it's more profitable to not have it on the market than it is to have it on the market. And, there's something very messed up about this. There's something very messed up about the whole concept of withholding things in order to make more money.
Yeah, I like, for real, I would say like the biggest example of that for me recently, like I've been on and off a lot of medications, so I've seen like issues with licensing and like patenting medications in the past and stuff. But whenever I found out that they were putting patents on the COVID vaccines, I really struggled with that concept, because I was like, how are we doing this when people need this and it's an epidemic and it's a crisis? Like, how is it allowed to do something like that? And it just made me really realize that we need to change and like kind of revisit a lot of our legal procedures in the US, especially.
Just think back to the early beginnings of HIV and AIDS and the entire controversy between the French and American scientists who developed the first tests for that virus, and how that was withheld. The testing was withheld so that they could sort out which one of them was going to make the money.
Because it's just kind of terrifying whenever you realize that in a lot of cases with corporations and governments, that money is more value than people. And
There you
Like
go.
that comes down into how we apply all of our laws, including with video games and stuff like that. Like people are affected by the laws that we have enforcing media, just like they are with healthcare. It reflects back and forth in how we like basically change the laws to make people more money instead of making things better for the people that use them and experience things.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I do have an idea on in terms of, I don't think this will ever happen, but it should be that if you have CDC that gives grant money to things like or take that back, if you have things like more in my experience, housing and urban development, if you have grants that that specify if like a grants that are for certain levels of income, say for homeless or things like that, then government, this government should set up something like losing their train of thought quite like I am. Should set up maybe having these companies like hospitals and things like that be covered more with grant money to make not hospitals, big pharma be covered by that, so that there is a steady streamline of money coming in, and so they and then government can regulate things like CDC can regulate how that money is being regulated based on the data that they have.
Yeah, like, so I know that the vaccines for COVID, as well as like a lot of other types of medications, get money from government grants, which are publicly funded basically because of tax money and everything like that. So it serves to reason that the cycle of that would mean that they would not patent it in a way that would increase the likelihood of the pandemic continuing. You know what I mean? It felt kind of backwards to me. And it's the same way with stuff like insulin and stuff like that, that like the money that pharmaceutical companies get from that is not always their own capital. It's often reduced tax rates or grants or something like that that they can use to fund that research. And then they don't pass that down to the consumers and people in need. So I think that some policies like could really do a changing. And like you had mentioned HIPAA, a lot of people really do not know what HIPAA is. And that has been a very fun topic of conversation on Twitter lately, where I've just been like, that's not what that means. So education is also important.
Oh, I was gonna spearhead this, but I feel like you've been doing that all along. What do you think HIPAA is?
So HIPAA is basically an agreement between you and your medical provider. It is a governmental law that oversees that agreement, where the provider of healthcare who has access to your medical records says, I won't give these to other people without your permission, including other doctors or companies or pharmaceutical companies, unless you authorize it in writing, and we keep that record on hand for a set amount of time. And they have to be renewed regularly and stuff like that.
7 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had to learn about HIPAA because I worked in education for a while and I worked for the government for a while. And I've struggled very hard to communicate to people who aren't also disabled and going and engaging with HIPAA on a regular basis, because I constantly have to sign that paperwork because I'm always at the doctor. And like, so they'll learn about it and then forget, or like they'll never have to actually sign the papers because they don't go to the doctor's often. And they're like, HIPAA is something totally different than this. But what it is just that simple. Like it is governing this agreement between you and healthcare providers. It's not really much outside of that, except like structure to support that agreement.
Yeah, so when somebody, um, I would say, oh, this is a conversation about liberals and conservatives, and no, it's not.
Mm-mm.
It's the majority of people.
Oh yeah, most
It's
people are very unfamiliar with it.
it's like if I had to guess, it'd be 70% of people, and then the 30% would be the people who know. Yes. It's it is not a it's not a political thing. It is most people just don't know what HIPAA is.
Yep.
Now, and in regards to this pandemic, it's and I get it. I'm not being judgmental on them. They um on anyone. HIPAA, when reading it, is very confusing in general. It's like you said, um, if you want to apply HIPAA to everyday life, it is more of, hey, I'm high functioning, and I'm glad to tell that to anyone. But I, if we go outside of this podcast, or if strangers saw me and said to every one of their friends, "Oh, this guy is high functioning," that's crossing a line. um, it's more about being able to. It's more about protecting the information of that person, and that it's consent culture. It's giving that person the opportunity to say, no, I don't want that information to go out, or yes, I do. Um, it's not,
Yeah.
it's not, it's confidential, but
Mhm.
it's not secret or top secret information. It's confidential information, basically.
Yeah, and like a lot of people, I think one of the things that becomes confusing is the difference between uh someone outside of a healthcare environment asking you for medical information for things like jobs or for entry into spaces or something like that. Like people are allowed to ask those questions in some cases. Not most employers aren't allowed to ask if you're like disabled or something like that, but that there are a lot of engagements where people are allowed to say like, hey, like, are you vaccinated, or do you have a cold, or something like that, before you can go into a place. But that is still based on you voluntarily consenting that information. And if you choose not to consent, they can still be like, I'm sorry, but like, if you don't consent, this space isn't for you. Just like any other space that requires you to provide information. Like if you are visibly drunk, you can't go into a bar. Like that is a rule in some places. So I think like it's very hard to understand that there is a difference, especially in what we're educated about as like how to apply things to our lives. Is like there's a difference between this like law that governs a specific engagement, which is with your healthcare provider, and is used to prevent you from predation or misuse of power, or like family members or people you don't know getting your information, or invasive practices by pharmaceutical companies. And the difference between that and whether you can engage in environments that are not medical environments. And I think that that is a lot of time, like people were saying that conventions couldn't ask for vaccine records, um, which they can, because that is a matter of public safety. It has nothing to do with them being a medical provider that would share your information. They're asking you to voluntarily give that information so that you may access the resource that they are offering. And that's a very different thing than a doctor saying, I'm not going to share your information whenever you come into this office because we agreed to that.
Yeah, um, these people are not being protected by HIPAA.
Mm-hmm.
It's they have not been diagnosed as for one,
Yeah.
and they can't, and you can't self-diagnose. Like, I'll say this on record, I had a physician that diagnosed me. So And
Yeah,
I
I
have
think
things on record.
it's so tough with people like because of the healthcare situation in the US. A lot of people are relying so heavily on like the internet for information about what is wrong with them and having trouble getting to a doctor, paying for a doctor to get that verified in any way, that it is becoming more common for some people necessarily to rely on, in some cases, self-diagnosis. But the reality is there's no protection for self-diagnosis. Self-diagnosis to the legal system and the medical system means nothing. They do not care, and it sucks. But that's part of the problem with things like HIPAA. They only protect the engagement with the healthcare provider. So if you say on the internet, I have, bipolar, like I have bipolar and I'm very open about it, I know that as soon as I say that online, I have lost all protections of anything. Anyone can treat me however they want to based on that information, and I can't do anything about it. I can try to avoid discrimination or pursue legal things with like employers and stuff like that, but that's in a completely different place than HIPAA. It's like a completely different world because there is no protection about the secrecy thereof, and that matters.
And as somebody who's and I have disclosed on here, I've disclosed on other places that have gotten that get a lot of foot traction, have a lot of people who are following. So on a level, I do understand, I am, if I speak on it or say I eventually have a TED Talk or something like that, I am eventually going to talk about this. I understand that I will be treated differently than others when it comes to autism and high functioning or even invisible disabilities. And when I say invisible disabilities, that's what I'm comfortable in saying. I don't say for my mental health or it just doesn't, to me, that just doesn't feel right to me saying that. What else? I mean, I don't have a good I do have a good transition into the next topic. So this month is Pride Month. Yay. I'm somebody who, I like to say, have spent the last couple of years trying to go on YouTube, go on Twitch to see certain content creators within the LGBTQ community, try and help them out on some level. And I know that like the one thing that stands out, that's kind of a requirement, is having pronouns. When I say he, him, am I doing this right? Because I want to be absolutely sure.
So I genuinely don't think there's any way to do queerness wrong. Now, I use queer instead of LGBT because the acronym is a little hard for me to pronounce because of speech issues. But whenever I say that, that includes everyone in the acronym, including Two-Spirit people and ACE people and everything. I think that pronouns are basically a way that we signal the way we're engaging with others. So like I use they, them, or he, him. I use 2 sets of pronouns, but I also have friends who don't use any pronouns at all. So you use their name whenever you talk about them. And so it really depends on how you personally see yourself and like to be referred to. And if you're comfortable with something like he, him, and that fits who you feel you are, then it's great to say upfront whenever you meet people, hey, this is my name and these are my pronouns. And that way they can say their pronouns and their name that they want to use in that situation. Because some of us are queer in some spaces and closeted in others. And that's part of the reason why pronouns are important, is because it kind of signals whether a space is going to be more welcoming or not. Because it says that the people who you're talking to have some sort of baseline respect for the use of open pronoun and identity dialogue. So that's why they tend to become like a signifier of that kind of use. So saying he, him is great. But generally, like whatever ones you want to use or none at all is totally fine too.
Okay. All right. I hope I'm getting it right. Okay.
I'm sure you're doing great.
I'm yeah. That's all I wanted to that's all I wanted to talk about on that. If there's anyone else who wants I see that there isn't much else to talk about on this. But I do let's see. Hey, we can I'll bring up a game called Pac-Man 99. Have any of you two seen that game as of recently?
I have seen stuff about it, but I haven't directly checked it out myself. I've heard it was coming out and like some stuff about it, but I haven't actually gotten to play or anything.
All I've seen is what other people have played. It looks just like a regular Pac-Man game, but you can put different different backgrounds like Pong and things like that. You can change your character to and this might interest you, Lisa. They have a background of Dig Dug and other things. Yes, exactly. But no, it's supposed to play a lot like the Pac-Man game, but you're playing against 98 other people. And so
Oh no, that could be fun.
Yeah. Because everybody knows Fortnite. We keep making fun of it because we don't here on this podcast we make fun of it because we don't exactly like Tyler Ninja Blevins. Hey, we don't mind him. Nothing good or bad from him. But but we often do make fun of Fortnite and how 100 or 99 people get dropped off a plane and then they basically fight for their lives and either it's an incredibly slow-paced game or the or there's a huge battle and there's no in between until you get to like the top 10 basically in a match. But and it's the same is true for like Pac-Man 99 or even Bomberman or Online, which we can get into that too.
Is Bomberman related to the YouTuber Bomberman, or is it the YouTuber reference Bomberman? I don't know which came first.
Bomberman came first.
Okay. I thought so, but I wasn't 100% sure. So
yeah. Bomberman is owned by Konami, and so if you know a guy named Konami that has a channel that is obviously fake, or it's the Konami channel, basically. Cool. If it's a guy,
I will say I looked at the Super Bomberman online art, and I think it's really cute, and it's reminiscent of a lot of like really fun game style art that I've seen before. And from what I can tell of the game, it looks like it's pretty exciting. And
And
like, that's pretty cool to see, like, cute art and like a fun, like, kind of battle arena kind of environment that looks like.
yes, and this is not to be confused with the Nintendo Switch game that came out at launch.
Mhm.
This is a completely separate game that is built mainly for online purposes. I played an hour of it, and I liked using the blue Bomberman. um, Fun to you have you can use a set of characters, and the week that I played, there was Solid Snake and Metalhead, and things like characters like that that have like superpowers basically. But
Nice.
but then there's the standard Bomberman, the pink Bomberman, and all those characters. But yeah, yeah, those two games I like watching and even like playing. So
Nice.
yeah, but they do play differently than it is a step up from the original. In the past, they had Nintendo had a game called uh, Mario 35, which
Mhm.
was to celebrate their 35th anniversary of Super Mario Brothers. So you got the 1-1 stage all the way up to 8-4. So there was that. I personally want to see Turtles in Time be made as a like 99 game. That'd be so awesome.
That'd be pretty cool.
um, but I know that there's a lot of legal issues under TMNT in terms of games. I already know that. What else? I yeah, I think we can. There's one topic that I going to skip. I do want to get in a conversation with both of you about like invisible disabilities. Like, what can we do? Yeah, what can we do to help promote? My and I know Lisa, that you heard my 2 cents about this conversation, that a lot of it stems from states that have right to work laws.
Yes.
Because say I could disclose to them, and then even if I do qualify, everything about me qualifies for the position, they could still turn me down and not give a reason why.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I applied for a job. This was years ago, and I have both visible and invisible disabilities. I don't call them disabilities, but well, for these purposes. And it was really interesting because they followed the law to the letter. No questions they weren't supposed to ask, nothing like that. Except that when it came time to go into the interview room, everybody ran up the stairs and expected me to follow. Guess what? I didn't get hired.
So frustrating.
Yeah, I had far and away the best qualifications for that job. And it's interesting how they can test without testing.
Hmm.
So whether or not you disclose anything, they're going to figure it out. They make these efforts, especially larger corporations.
Absolutely. I think that's actually a trend. So like I live in Pennsylvania, and near the Pittsburgh area, it's extremely hilly and every building is very tall. So there's a lot of stairs and they're not always elevators, and things like that. And while I have no visible disabilities, I definitely ran into the issue at multiple places that I interviewed at whenever I was looking for jobs, where they'd be like, oh, we have to go up these like 3 flights of stairs. And I'm just like, I can't do that. Like, you may not be able to tell, but like, I'm not going to be able to make it. Or I'd do it and then I wouldn't be able to go to the next interview I had lined up because I was so exhausted or beat up. And like, they could tell that something was wrong both times. And it was consistently frustrating that there are a lot of ways that interviews are put into places and into ways that are less accessible, like requiring that you be face to face for an interview, doing extensive, complicated questionnaires and handwriting things, which is very hard for me with tremors and stuff like that. Like, every step of the way, there are barriers, and there are barriers that are put there to ensure that only people who are able to get through. And it's a cruel and messed up cycle, I think.
You must be able to work well with others. In other words, no autistic people need apply.
How well? Are others meaning that, and I love giving this example. There's this one person who I call not an other, who I work for a big company, and there's this guy who would, I would get there at about 8:30. No, I would get to the office around 8. He would, every once in a while, we would go get coffee. He'd get to his spot around 9:15, and then we would go get coffee, stay in line, and then around 9:30, 9:40ish, when he got out of the line, he would go talk to one of his friends who was in another department, and then I would come back. He would come back around 10:30, and that's when he would start working. And he wouldn't stop working until a little after I left. So I was just like, oh, when you talk about, oh, work well with others, I assume that that's him.
Yeah.
So, but
the various ways that they put it.
Yeah.
I think that like PA is a right to work state as well. And even whenever I was working for like a big company that had a union for the jobs that I was in and everything, there's a lot of like negative stigma towards being ill, especially if you don't tell people at first and then they find out later. I had been working at the company that I was at for quite a few years, like over 5 years, at the point where I started having a lot of issues with my fibromyalgia, like making everyday life just extremely difficult. And I was having a whole bunch of assorted health problems. And I was having like yearly mental breakdowns, basically, that would make me lock myself in the house and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't work. And it would take me out of work for like 2 weeks. And I was anxious and a mess all the time. And eventually, like, people started asking why I was gone a lot and like what was going on, if I was feeling okay. And I was honest. And I explained that I had fibromyalgia and bipolar disorder. And this was before like my several new diagnoses since then. And at one point, like, someone literally like backed up while I was talking to them after I said that I had bipolar disorder. And they didn't like talk to me anymore.
Oh God.
After that happened, people started taking work away from me and pretending like I was like somehow unstable at work. Whenever I was getting my work done, they just stopped giving it to me because they thought I was incompetent now. And because I wasn't in every single day, like 9-hour days, burning myself out anymore. I was taking like half days and stuff because I was panicking at work and I couldn't physically do like early mornings in winter and stuff like that. And it got so bad that like the worst part of it was not that I couldn't do the job. It was how people acted towards me because I was disabled and they thought that I was crazy. And it hurt, and it like made me struggle really hard even when I left there to work other places and to find new places to work, because I didn't know, like, do I have to tell people up front? Because some people were like, oh, you should have told me up front. I can't believe that you kept this from me for years. It's like, I don't have to tell you that I have illnesses until they're a problem and it matters. Like, that's it. That's the only point at which I ever need to disclose to you what's going on. And I should only have to say, I'm sick, leave me alone. Like, I shouldn't have to like tell you my life story. And
reasonable accommodation.
yeah, like
Reasonable.
it is unfortunate that there's like so much stigma, and that's part of the reason why people put these weird requirements on like job interviews and stuff. And it's because they're afraid of having to work with someone who might not be a neurotypical abled person that does everything just like them. They don't know how to do it. They're terrified of perhaps that it might affect them and make them different too. And it's a toxic belief that kills people.
It is and it isn't. I don't necessarily like saying this on air, but used to be a career services counselor. When it comes to a recruiter, the basic fear is the fear that this person won't be able to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
And because they don't have enough data for people like myself or high functioning, ADHD, ADD, Asperger's syndrome. I don't believe in the DS. I don't agree with the DSM-5. I'll point that out. It's more about they don't have enough information. They want to hire that person, but they're afraid that they won't be able to do the job based on their how can I say this? Based off their disability, even though because they don't have enough information, they want to go in. It seems alien to them, and that's the thing they get from. They would rather be safe than sorry in that regard. I'm not agreeing with what I don't agree with how HR does this, but I do understand.
Like, I understand the reasoning, but to me, it comes down to a loss of capital over the value of people again. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, this person might start this job and 6 months later, they may find out that they aren't able to keep up with it. And like, in the end, that hurts everyone, yes. But like, giving people the chance to do the job, and in most cases, they end up doing it, is to me more important, I guess. And as much as I understand that recruiters' jobs are based on how many people they place and stay in those jobs and stuff like that, I get that. I think it's partially like the culture that needs to change, not just the practices. And the idea that like disabled people are doomed to give up or fail. And that's mostly based on the fact that our people in corporations and in organizations don't do the work to support the disabled people in their organizations, in part because those people are afraid to speak about their disabilities because of the repercussions.
I would say not only do they not do the work to support people, but they do a lot to drive them out.
Mm-hmm.
They leave. in many ways actively seek to drive them out. And I've had that experience at a, I worked as a teacher in community colleges, and there was one that I worked at that I have got to say was the most hellish place to work, because it was run by a social clique. And so they talk about, we want you to come to these professional development activities. Well, these professional development activities were nothing but a party and a social club, and had nothing really to do with professional development. And I was eventually fired from that job, the only job in my life I've ever been fired from, basically for not being social enough. Well, I was one of the hardest working teachers there. And one of the most popular ones there in my department. But none of that matters. The abilities that you have don't matter. How hard you work doesn't seem to matter. The only thing that matters is, can you socialize? Can you be a part of the clique in some of these jobs? And to me, that's one of the reasons that I would say that I don't talk about disabilities when it comes to things like being somewhere on the spectrum or something like that. These are differences, but the only reason that they're disabilities is because, quite frankly, neurotypical people have no empathy and no ability to relate to people who aren't exactly like them. So,
I would say like that reflects really largely on like the pressure to like be part of the norm, which is like one of the hardest things for like neurodivergent people in general. Is there these expectations that we're supposed to meet? And for me, a lot of those, I ended up I went from a kind of nervous, shy person to someone who was like binge drinking and partying all the time, in part because there was so much encouragement to drink and engage in drinking social spaces at my professional jobs and my work in freelancing at conventions, that I felt like it was the only way for people to like me and to accept me as one of their own, because that's what they expected. And it ended up messing with a whole bunch of my trauma triggers and stuff like that until it became a habit for me. And I do largely blame the pressure to be part of the norm community, where this is like what people do, as part of why it got so bad for me. And I've seen so many neurodivergent people struggle in workplaces because of, well, you have to go to social events and you have to speak in front of people and you have to like do lunches with everyone and stuff like that. And there's so many opportunities for people to bully you or isolate you and like target every single thing that is different about you in those special situations. That
I'm gonna head for a different room. My dogs are barking.
Nope, sorry.
Probably hear them loudly.
It's all good.
But yeah, like the pressure for normativeness is a lot of what corporate homogenization is about. And it's in academia too, because I experienced similar issues. And like a lot of the jobs that I have left or been fired for, the reasons why were that I was not able to meet the expectations of the norm. And
Yeah. I think that's, every job that I had, I wound up leaving for that reason and no other reason. Almost every job. I mean, I finally wound up with a teaching job in a wonderful place and wound up having to leave because we became homeless because nobody pays teachers enough. But
Yeah, have to. I get that. I've done a lot of jobs. I've done what's it called? I've done substitute teaching. I've done that before. Yeah. So I know that school districts do not pay their teachers or their substitute or paras nearly enough, even though it is unexpectedly a very hard job. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to school and got my master's for leadership. And right before I finished school, I had a head injury in a car accident because I was working 2 jobs and going to school full time, and I fell asleep driving. And after that, I got through my last semester. I had 4.0, and I realized that I didn't think that I could handle a teacher's workload anymore because of I spent 2 years in recovery from my concussion, and it was a really, really hard time. And the more I looked at what teachers were doing now and what they were getting paid, I was like, I won't even be able to pay my student loans unless I'm working a full-time, like, permanent position as a teacher. And I can't do that workload because between my existing disabilities and the effect that the concussion had on me, like, I couldn't like function for months after my accident. It was like I managed to push my way through my final semester, and then I crashed horribly and I had a whole bunch of symptoms and stuff. And I realized that like the environment for teachers is so difficult. It's so overwhelming. It's so heavy. Had I not had my head injury, I might have been able to do it. But whenever I did, it took away that ability. It took the ableness that I had remaining, and to do like such a heavy and challenging job that requires constant social engagement as well as off work time engaged in doing tasks and stuff like that. And I think that teachers are like, I think it is super valuable to have disabled teachers and neurodivergent teachers because there are not enough of them, but that the environment for education is not structurally supporting people who do that enough for neurodivergent teachers and disabled teachers to be successful and be able to live healthily and well while they do their work.
Most of the time, yeah. There, you live in Pennsylvania. I obviously Retro Detroit Nerdfighters obviously lives in Michigan.
Mhm.
It's I would say significantly worse than yours because like I mean just the resources that we have. There's this thing called the EAA that is able to take money away from schools.
Yeah,
It's-
PA has we have like a overabundance of teachers, and that's why we don't have enough resources largely. While I know that Michigan and a couple of the other states up in that area struggle more with the fact that like the government is taking money away from the schools, and like there are just not enough resources to support teachers being well paid and supported at all. So it's just different issues with the same ending result that everyone is just not getting support. And I know it's definitely more significant in Michigan than in PA for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, here, at least 75 to 80% of community college teachers are now adjuncts. And when you are an adjunct, you work 60 to 80 hours a week for about $1,000 a month.
It's similar here. I would say probably a little bit better depending if you're in a richer area. But like it's community college like the payment for teachers is absolutely shameful. And the fact that they have no job security at all is really not okay. And it especially affects like disabled students and teachers because like not having someone who understands what you're going through, which a lot of disabled students experience, is very troublesome. It helps to have teachers who understand disability and neurodivergence. So having teachers in those roles matters. But it's so hard to do those jobs whenever you're not getting paid enough to afford treatment, medication, housing, food, and still expected to work so many hours.
Mhm.
and then there's the really big problem with invisible disability, or especially autism, which is after school.
Mm.
Because I mean, one of the big problems is that you go from having, say for instance, 200 to 300 people who are around your age to um, living with just your parents or family or things along those lines, and it's like that just extenuates the amount of interaction that person can get. You're, instead of dealing with, oh, you have your circle of friends that are 8 to 10 people, you're dealing with one person all the time. um, and that and that in the short and the long run is detrimental to people who have invisible disability, ADD, ADHD, autism.
Yeah. I had a really weird experience with school and college and stuff like that, because I was initially homeschooled because I grew up in a really rural area on a farm, and I was homeschooled, and then I spent a few years in cyber school, and then for almost my entire time in college I went to school online because my anxiety is very severe, and I also was undiagnosed with my ADHD for like my entire life until about 2 months ago. And I didn't know what was wrong or why I was having troubles in school or interacting with people, doing my work. I just basically buckled down and just 100% focused on it and hoped that I would get through. So I ended up often being in classes with people much younger than me or much older than me, and had like no social relationships except whatever I made through gaming or through like the online experience, basically. And most of the time there were still huge age gaps in there. So I never really felt like I had a bunch of people like me. I still don't. This is something I constantly struggle with. And it is partially because I don't think like everybody else does, and my brain works a little different. And I have like, head trauma stuff that made me think a little bit differently even more as I got older, because I've had 4 head injuries, and that kind of changes things. And with my physical limitations, because of the invisible disabilities that I have that are physical, like I can't do like sports or like go out and like hike with people or anything like that. I'm limited. I recently watched Bo Burnham's special on Netflix called Inside, which I recommend with the heavy caveat that if you are in a bad mental state, you should not watch it. Wait until you have a buddy and you're feeling okay. It's very heavy. And there's discussion of like suicide ideation and stuff. It's kind of challenging, but
I know Bo Burnham. He knows
yeah,
the type of content he does.
yeah, the special is amazing. He did it all like inside one room during the course of the pandemic, and it's really impressive. And one of the big things he talks about is the nature of like isolation, as well as being kind of inside your own head, and how that makes it so hard to engage anywhere but the internet. But the internet itself is also toxic in some ways to us, and so is like the capitalistic culture that encourages it. And I watched it and I had the realization that like I, as someone who like people perceive as being able, whenever I go to like try and get jobs and stuff like that, often end up like putting myself out there, then ending up getting disappointed, because people, as soon as they realize what I am and who I am and that I'm different, I end up having to go back inside again. And I have to like go away from the possibilities of success and a future that people expect of me, because I am not able and people don't expect that. And so they give me a chance and then take it away. And that has been like my whole life has been, I work really, really, really hard and I build it up, but eventually I crash because I can't keep up that like all the time, everything that able people seem to do. And eventually I break down, but you're not allowed to do that. you're not allowed to show signs, you're not allowed to unmask, you're not allowed to be openly struggling or needing help in any way. And so I fall apart and people drop me, whether it's bosses or teachers or friends. They drop me like a hot potato and I'm left and I can't get any support anymore. And I think that that is a lot of the thing that people don't understand about invisible disabilities, especially, is people assume sometimes at first that you're capable and you have hope that you might be a part of something or you might succeed. And then they take it away when they find out that you're not what they really thought you were. And I think it is one of the coolest aspects of that engagement and that part of our lives.
It's like the thing that I say is, and scientists in this field and things like that, they don't do enough. They don't have enough information. They don't have enough research. One of the things that I've come to realize, couple tidbits. One, when it comes to like myself, they say that people who have autism sometimes have like a little bit harder time of speaking. But it's because like when I see myself versus someone else, I feel like I'm able to retain more information than the average person. And so I'm just going through that entire list of information that I have. And that's why it's taking so long. I'm holding more. And that's not, and that shouldn't be labeled as a deficit. It's just, I have that much information.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, and I'll put this company on blast because they're kind of awesome to me. They've been a lifesaver to me. It's a place called Autism Alliance of Michigan. They've gotten me like the past couple jobs, and one of the things that I did, like they would have these monthly meetings, and I would work a room. I would talk to every single person there, and what I came to find out was that before these people got a really good high-paying job, they all worked in retail. So I so then I started doing my homework and I started going to, say, retail stores within my area and coming to find out that there was like that every retail store has at least one person with autism. And that would mean that and that there'd be at least one or two people that have autism. That would mean that, oh, these people do know how to work. These people work the extra hours. They're dedicated. And that's contrary to the norm. So sorry. But that's just a thought. There's no way I can go to every single retail store in America and say, oh, there's at least one person there. But there is good reason to believe that. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I definitely think that one of the misconceptions that like allistic people and neurotypical people have is that neurodivergent people can't do the work or don't want to do the work or are incapable for some reason. And like for me, like most people I know who are autistic or have ADHD or any kind of neurodivergence or any kind of invisible disability can do work. It's partially about making sure that like the workplaces aren't like toxic or harmful to them, but it's also partially about like just giving them space to do the work in the way that they do a good job, like allowing accommodations or even just like not expecting them to do extra things that are not the job, because sometimes like the social stuff, that's not part of doing your job, and having it added on and that it's a high pressure thing to do can cause a lot of challenge and difficulty to people who are like, no, this is my work. I want to go in and do my work and then go home because that is how a job works, right? Like it is a, just because they don't necessarily do everything that we expect people to do doesn't mean that it's not them doing the work. And I think that a change in like how we perceive what doing a job is and like what like neurodivergent people have to bring to the table to make them like worth hiring is very different than what we actually like have understood now. And that's a challenge that's I think been a problem for people who are neurodivergent for a long time. And I'm hoping that, you know, we can keep pushing forward better accommodations, a reinterpretation of what it means to be working actively and doing a job, and understanding also like there are plenty of people who are neurodivergent who already are working, you just don't know. And like you just don't like think about it. Just because they haven't told you doesn't mean they aren't. Like
Yeah.
You talk about though not creating a toxic work environment. And I think it's really difficult when we live in a society that has a toxic culture.
oh yeah.
And when we talked earlier like about how teachers are treated and how they're undervalued, devalued,
Mm-hmm.
underpaid. I mean, you should never have somebody who dedicates their life to teaching students have to teach a semester while living in their car because they can't afford housing.
Agreed.
And yet, you know, we undervalue teachers. We undervalue a lot of the medical personnel that do the hardest of the work. We undervalue basically anybody who makes a real contribution, and then look at who gets the highest paychecks in this society. Look
Mhm.
at look at what we do apply value to in this society. It's a toxic culture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that culture is defined by, um, you know, people who have power. It's defined by power, and of that, it'd be very not to work or any other atmosphere for that matter,
Yeah.
because we're taught these things from the time we're born.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It is very toxic, and it goes like the whole way to the top with how bad it is. And I think that a large part of the problem is that a lot of the focus is on like capital, and a lot of the focus is also on keeping people in power and with privilege in those same states, regardless of what
absolutely.
happens to others, right?
Yep.
And I think that there needs to be like literally like global change in regards to this. Like this is a huge issue around the world for a lot of people. And I don't know like if education is like the largest part of it, but I think education would help, like teaching people about neurodivergence and stuff like that, and helping people to understand their differences and respect them and stuff like that. But like the reality is that even as early as my education as someone who was homeschooled, my textbooks never talked about anyone ever being different in the ways that I was different. And if they ever mentioned anyone having a mental illness or a disability, because they were highly like Christian and highly like conservative textbooks, because that's what you get in homeschooling a lot of the time, they were framed very badly and very negatively. And I don't really think that the people in many public schools, at least in Pennsylvania, have very different experiences, unfortunately. And I think that we need to start like kind of at the very beginning. And the benefit of like online culture is that people are exposed to different people much more early in life now. And they see how they're different and yet they still are amazing people. That's like with Pride Month, even you see this, like people are becoming more accepting of queer people and trans people because the environments are, you know, changing because of the internet. However, we still also have trans bills that are trying to take away rights for trans kids and trans adults. And it's the people at the top that are preventing the people in normal life from actually having rights and being respected and treated like they have the ability to succeed. And I would love to see that change.
Oh, I should bring this up. And one of my friends is probably going to slap me in the face by saying this, but there was this ad for Robitussin. They had the LGBT colors on it. um, all that, and there's this one person I saw who commented on it. I'm not going to say who it is, but they were like, "Oh, big pharma sucking up to the LGBTQ community to prove that they're not as shitty as they are."
Yeah,
And
I mean,
this person,
the Pride adverts this month have been a little bit rough. It's been a little bit difficult for me. But you know, I'm always torn because like I know corporate pride means that people in those corporations and people who only have access to things like Target or Walmart do actually get access to queer things in a way that is safe for them. But at the same time, I freaking hate corporations and want them to stop. So, you know, complicated feelings.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, this person got like tens of thousands of likes and like thousands of retweets, and I was just like, hey, they're just being matter of fact. They're not even being funny.
Yeah,
But
that's wild.
yes, and for the folks at home who are, when I said this person is going to slap me, yes, this person and myself are both vaccinated, so no worries. All right, so yeah, so I have one more thing on this list, and hey, you had said before the show you were wondering what this thing called M&W means. All right, so there's this YouTuber who's been around for a pretty long time. I've watched him since around 2008. His name is Takahata 101. And he has this Twitch channel that he's doing VTubing and something called Multiverse Nexus Wrestling. And
Nice.
the great thing about MNW is that the people who consistently watch him end up getting their own characters, and so they cut promos and do advertisements on a show.
Nice.
And guess who got his own character within the last few weeks?
Ooh.
So yes, this is sort of my way of giving a middle finger to people who think I can't speak well. So this just proves that they're wrong.
Awesome.
But yeah, I won't say who I am, but if you think that I'm going to be a nice guy, I'm not your wrestler.
Are you the heel? Are you the heel? It's very fun. I don't typically watch a ton of wrestling, but I'm like wrestling adjacent because like I like a little bit of it. And like my friend Nathan Paoletta made Worldwide Wrestling, and it's like an indie game about wrestling and stuff. And I love it. And I love spectating it more than anything. It's so fun to watch other people play because it's like a tabletop game and they like cut promos and all this stuff while they're playing. It's so great. And And like, it's funny seeing the overlap between gamers and wrestling fans, and like that enthusiasm for like playing a character and everything is so fun. I think it's so great. It's a really great thing.
Everything in my life, I've always played the nice guy or the person who's like this show, tried to play things really smart. But in this case, yes, I am the heel. And I love it. But yeah, that's sort of my announcement, that I have a character and
Awesome.
that the jokes will write themselves. But yeah, so Lisa, where can we find you outside of here?
Well, I have my email address.
I wouldn't leave it. I would leave it off this podcast.
Okay. Where can we find me?
Um,
Not very many places actually right now. Actually, I for people at Penguicon, they'll recognize me from Lightning Bug Crafts, because I had a table there, so I'm still doing that. Um, and other than that, for the moment, I've kind of been laid up because I am a caretaker for a family member with disabilities. And I also have my own disabilities. And that is basically taking up every second of every day at the moment. But I don't care if the email address is, if you share that with people, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, that's fine with me.
okay. I just want to. I am a master's in cybersecurity. I always play things safe. Um, but yeah, you can leave your email on here if you want.
Okay.
And then, Beau, where can we find you?
So I'm generally all over the internet. You can find me pretty easily just by Googling me. That's Beau Yeager Sheldon. I just changed my name at the beginning of this year whenever I got the legal approval, so I'm very excited about that.
Cool.
Thank you. But my website is briebeau.com. That's BRIEBEAU.com. And that also includes my blog, which is Thoughty. You can just click from it there, as well as my work history and links to a bunch of my other work. And my games are on Indie Press Revolution and DriveThruRPG for some of my games, including my charitable focus games that just go to charity, like the Trevor Project for Of the Woods, and also on brebo.itch.io, which is on itch.io, the big like game site that's getting more popular these days. And there are tons of stuff on there, including like a way that you can get like a whole collection of my games if you like them. And that also includes Script Change, which is my safety tool and content tool that you can use for tabletop games, streaming games, any kind of game environment. It uses like VHS type language, like rewind, play, pause, fast forward, to help facilitate play and content control. And I'm also on Twitter at Thoughty Games, and I'm on there pretty actively. I accept DMs, and I'm happy to talk to people about pretty much anything they want to talk about that I know about.
Reasonably. But no,
I mean, yeah, I guess I could give you my website too, which is easy. It's just lightningbugcrafts.com.
Heck yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, check that out. I'm gonna check yours out.
Thank you.
It sounds awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm just typing this out. But yeah, with me, you can find me on Twitter at Informed, informed with an A, or informed.com. You can probably find the podcast out on there at beInformed.already enough. We'll see it though. And yeah, thank you for being here again. And and don't forget to be awesome, the FTBA. Thank you.
Thank you.